of the transformation is really astonishing. And as many of us know, the UK is also showing leadership. It was wonderful that just yesterday, the UK government was able to announce a new target enshrined in law to reduce our emissions by 78% by 2035. That's already on top of our tough commitment to reduce emissions by 68% by 2030, and our net zero commitment by 2050. And we've shown already that this is possible, having nearly halved our emissions in less than 20 years while growing the economy by 75%. These goals and targets are important because they've sent a clear policy and market signal, and businesses, many of you here, are responding strongly to that signal and to that challenge. That's enabled us to reduce coal's share of electricity generation from 40% to 2% in less than a decade, to develop the largest offshore wind capacity in the world, and create one of the world's leading green finance markets. But we all recognise that we need to do more at home and globally. At the UN COP26 climate conference, which the UK will host in November, must be a moment where the UK, India and the world demonstrate ambitious action to keep the Paris process on track and work towards a net zero emission world. And this report, which we're celebrating today, highlights many useful areas of UK-India collaboration on this journey. Our partnership on energy already includes things like joint investments, research and innovation, collaboration on many policy and technical issues. And through international initiatives like the International Solar Alliance, we're also working together to mobilize the global transition to clean energy. Our businesses and innovators are also working together to develop new smart tech, renewables and storage solutions, and driving a revolution in electric mobility. And as has already been mentioned, finance is absolutely crucial. We're so delighted by the number of Indian green bonds already on the London Stock Exchange, but we think there's much more to come in that area too. So by working together, we can get the UK, India and the world on track to clean, affordable energy. And again, thank you all very much.
Thank you, Natalie, for those excellent opening remarks. What I'd like to do now is to move around the table, introduce our panelists for the discussion, and I'll start with Julian Viggers.
Hi, Justine, thank you. And good morning and good evening, good afternoon, wherever it may to everyone. I'm Julian Viggers. I'm the Chief Investment Officer of Mercia. Really pleased to be here today. And I've been at Mercia for circa 17 years now, and I oversee all of our equity investment activity. We have an excellent track record in venture investing right across the piece in the UK. So Mercia is a leading national investor focused on sourcing the thriving regional small, medium-sized enterprises in the UK. We have a portfolio now of around 400 assets, and we do this through our national networks, regional office presence, and we deliver both private equity, venture capital and debt, and what we term complete capital solution. So we have nearly 900 million of assets under management now. Approximately 250 million of that is unrestricted cash, and 50 million of that is on our Mercia Asset Management PLC listed balance sheet. So our investment model is really combines fund activities with our balance sheet, and selectively seeds and manages funds, LP funds, and accelerating the growth of businesses emerging from those funds. So as a regional investor, ESG has always been a central plank to our investment philosophy. Energy, clean tech, deep tech has been a key focus area for us for a long time now. Now, I guess we've all known about the electric revolution that's been upon us. Mercia's been invested in this whole area for 10 years or so. And that's really because we do know it takes an awfully long time to build fundamental new tech and disrupt markets. And part of our model does in fact involve us investing very early and even creating businesses in our third-party funds. And this was actually in the report Asset Cool, which is looking to address the significant issues of energy losses through transmission in transmission cables, and Faradion, again, Jim's here today, are examples of this. 10 years ago, we sought out and backed the founders of Faradion, and this is a battery company, really to research and create fundamental new IP in sodium-ion electrochemistry for batteries, and later provided further scale-up capital from our own balance sheet. We've also invested in another really interesting battery business in the Midlands in the UK called Acceleron, which is really looking to replace individual battery cells as opposed to the whole batteries when the charge goes off. So we're really happy to support Bridge India, and really we do understand that India is a really large potential and real market for our innovative tech entrepreneurs in the UK, and we have and will continue to encourage our businesses to look to the Indian market for partnerships and customers going forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Julian. Thank you very much. Well, with that, I think given the end to your opening, I think maybe it's appropriate to turn over to James Quinn, or should I say Jim Quinn? I heard you referring to him as Jim. So James, you have a double personality here on name. Turning it over to you.
Looking for money, it's James, but after you've invested, it's Jim, right? Thanks everybody. First of all, happy Earth Day, if it hasn't already been said. It's a good day to have this conference, and I think we've gotten quite a bit of publicity in India through our work with Bridge India, so thank you for your support there. And as Julian alluded to, like all overnight successes, we've been working at this for the last 10 years to bring this technology into the market. And I think India has a unique opportunity right now, I think, to lead the green energy transition. Population wise, very similar to China. Some of the best and brightest CEOs running some of the biggest companies in the world are from India, and also has a huge incentive. It's the largest importer of oil worldwide. 30 of the most polluted cities in the world, 22 are in India. And I think this incentive is really important. And if you want to, clean up the environment and go towards renewable energy, you need to look towards some kind of an energy storage type technology. So you get away from being dependent on the Middle East for oil, but China controls the lithium ion market. So then you become dependent on China. And I think as a nation, India, can really benefit from having its own energy security. And I think underlying all of this renewable energy, whether it's solar, whether it's wind, whether it's EVs, is a battery. And underlying the battery is the chemistry. And the reality is there's only really 2 or 3 choices. There's lead acid, which has been around for a long time. It's low cost, it works, but it's low performance and it's heavy. It's not environmentally sustainable necessarily. It's not good for the environment. But that's 70% of the market. People don't realize that lithium ion gets all the sexy headlines, but 420 gigawatts is 70% of the market is lead acid, and 160 gigawatts is lithium ion. And but revenue-wise, it's almost 50-50 because lithium ion is growing very, very fast. It's more expensive. But if you want to replace lead acid, you need to have a high performance alternative technology like lithium ion, but especially in India, it's a very price driven market. It needs to have a low cost alternative that's environmentally stable. And I think that's really the opportunity here. If you take a look at lithium ion technology, it's the materials are controlled by China. You have cobalt in it, which is coming primarily from the Congo. Which is often informally mined, driven by villages and so forth, and exploiting child labor. Environmentally, it's just not stable or sustainable. Sodium ion technology provides this lithium ion performance, but at a cost of ownership close to lead acid. And so it provides a unique opportunity for India, I think, to really lead the charge in the next generation here. I grew up in the late 60s as a kid. We had the space race, put a man on the moon, and got the whole nation behind a single vision of beating Russia at the time to put a man on the moon. And we did, and we won. And then we kind of stopped. We stopped investing in that, and the US had to pay Russia to put an astronaut on the International Space Station just as recently as a few years ago, until a startup came along, SpaceX, and started to be able to find a better way to do it. And I think the point there is you cannot outsource space exploration, your security with satellites and so forth as a nation, and you cannot outsource your energy security. And if you look at lithium ion technology, our co-founder, Chris Wright, licensed the first technology to Sony from Oxford University, which is in your laptop and your phones today. The other technologies for lithium ion today that are being used in EV were developed in the US and commercialized in China. And sodium ion is a UK technology, and we see a lot of interest in India. I think the challenge in India, last point here, the challenge in India, I think it's you ever see penguins going to the ocean? They all crowd up front and they stop at the edge. And they wait for who's going to go in first, and then they push one penguin in, and if there's no blood, then the other penguins jump in. And I think it's a little bit of India. They're waiting on the edge to make that big move. Who's going to be first to make this big move? And that's why I think it has a unique opportunity.
Thanks, James. Really great opening points made that hopefully we'll come back to, and it's very clear that technology and advancing technology has a huge role to play here, and in your space specifically around battery technology. So very keen to sort of dive a bit deeper into that here in a few minutes. Gauri Singh from ARENA, leading the way in the last decades around really pushing forward renewable energy. Give us a flavor of ARENA areas of focus, your role. Be great to hear.
Thanks, Justine, and thank you, Bridge India, for inviting me to this panel. ARENA is an intergovernmental agency. It's an agency that had its first assembly in 2011, so now it's a decade old. But we do have nearly universal membership as far as countries are concerned. So we have 163 countries that are members of ARENA. And this is an agency that has its mandate for developing and promoting the deployment of renewable energy. And when our agency started in 2011, as you can imagine, there wasn't too much traction around it. There was a feeling that this would be the next gen and the next thing to do. But now, with the cost having come down so dramatically, this is clearly one of the key technologies that's going to help us in the energy transition. I've read this really excellent report which Bridge India has brought out, and there are a lot of things that really resonated very strongly with me. We have just very recently at the Berlin Energy Transition Dialogues, which was held end of March, we had come out with a 1.5 degree centigrade scenario, an outlook for 2050 for keeping the temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. And our analysis really showed that the way forward is going to be betting on already proven technologies. There would, of course, be some space for the technologies that are currently under development and will become very critical in the next few decades. But this really, and I'll probably talk about it later as we go deeper into the discussion between what we are seeing as opportunities for UK and India to come together and collaborate. But I just want to leave it at this point that last year, which was pretty challenging for many of the sectors, and we saw how economies tanked. For renewables, it was in fact an amazing year, because normally we have a deployment globally of around 180, 190 gigawatts. And 2020 saw 260 gigawatts. So, there is a clear shift that's happening, and energy transition is unstoppable. I think the only issue that's being debated now is the speed at which it has to happen. So the direction is clear, but it's all about the speed. And I have to say that the financial markets have also responded to this shift that's happening at the ground I'll give you an example of the S&P, the Clean Energy Index actually went up by 137%, while the energy index of S&P came down by 37%, and the energy index is much more fossil fuel heavy. So it's an indication that the shift also is happening not just in the intents that are being voiced and stated by the leaders of the large and major economies, but it's also now the financial markets that are following that lead and making it possible for these shifts to happen. So I'll stop here.
Thank you, Guri. Some really important points there, and one that resonates for me specifically is around the increase in renewable energy output. That in the time of COVID, I can say that in a lot of the markets that we've been operating in, there was a lot of question as to whether this would actually hamper efforts for scalability. And what you're telling us is that it was the complete opposite, and that 2020 showed a significant increase, which is something that we should be reflecting on in the discussions and tease out a bit more as to why that's happening, given that there was concern that coal would continue to be seen as the cheaper, more faster option to rely on in a time of the impact. So that's really good to hear. Jonathan, over to you.
Hello all, and just to echo the sentiments from Guri there on 2020 renewables, we are absolutely seeing the same trend. The thought that the growth or deployments of renewables worldwide would actually dip because of the COVID pandemic, we have absolutely not seen. So I think one of the positives from this pandemic is that actually the deployments of renewables. So I think that's a first positive that I would mention. Great to be here. I think it's a very exciting time for the UK-India relationship, and I commend Bridge India on the excellent report. I'm Jonathan Cohen. I'm head of the energy team at Howard Kennedy. We're an international full-service law firm, and we are very much centred on the energy sector, but also doing business in India and inward investment from India into the UK. Just in terms of energy, we've seen an explosion over the last sort of 24 months in terms of clean energy, both in the UK and worldwide. And we advise project sponsors, developers, funders, large corporates and CMI customers, which is an interesting sector, I'll come on to that later, and SMEs on renewable energy project developments around the globe and clean tech financing. And we advise on all technologies, including wind, offshore and onshore, solar, battery storage, solar PV, hydrogen, CHP, CCUS, hydrogen, wave and tidal and electric vehicles. And one of the interesting trends we're seeing at the moment is actually deployment of these assets. There's lots of requirements and tensions to do that. And one of the challenges we're seeing is actually some of the regulatory environments or frameworks are not keeping up in line with some of these technologies. And I think that's a challenge for both governments and for policymakers. So I'd make that point at the start. As I said, we're dedicated India group, which is headed by Chirag Rao, who is present here today and is a Bridge India ambassador. And so we advise Indian clients within the diaspora and India across a range of sectors, including corporate, energy, commercial, real estate transactions. So we really understand the Indian markets and the clientele. There's never probably been a better time to launch this report, I would think, in terms of the opportunities. We're obviously within the year of COP26. We've got this rising ESG agenda at the moment where ESG really is at the top of boardroom agendas around the globe, which I don't think has ever been that prominent before. And actually, as we said, the COVID pandemic, actually, I think one of the things that we're seeing is actually the rebuild after the COVID pandemic is actually building back bigger and better. And one of that is energy and infrastructure projects, especially around low carbon and renewables projects. So I think that's the trend that we'll see throughout the rest of the year, but also in next year as well, in terms of growing back better and greener. Just in the UK and areas that we could help in terms of that India relationship, I think we've seen lots of great strides toward this transition to net zero over the last couple of years. I think we are the first country to implement legally binding carbon targets or mitigation targets, the Climate Change Act 2008, the first major economy to pass net zero emissions laws, the introduction of the government's 10-point plan, and then as of yesterday or the day before, this new carbon budget that was alluded to earlier, announced yesterday to slash UK emissions by 78% against 1990 levels by 2035. So I think that gives a flavour of the really great strides, the ambitions that we have in the UK, and I think one of the takeaways from this is actually we really want to showcase that around the globe, but also to help countries like India in their implementation of this net zero, this energy transition drive. Obviously, the India's renewable and energy sector, the potential is huge, and again, where the UK can add much expertise and indeed capital to this growth. So I think again, it's a really opportune, it's a really exciting time for the relationship. So just to finish, I'm very much looking forward to discussing how the two nations collaborate and also discussing the contents of the report. So thank you. Thank
you, Jonathan, and an excellent segue into the first question that I do actually want to build on a lot of what you're saying there, which is around the UK-India relation and what can be done there. Because to James' point, India is sort of sitting on the precipice of almost a tipping point of that when India actually manages to move forward and scale up, it's going to be quite a powerful reaction to an impact into the market globally. We know that India, China, and US are seen as the big three economies when we're talking about net zero. And so where the UK has sort of been this fostering and developing around all that is green and has been disseminating that into economies around the world through its support, there is no doubt in what the report has highlighted that there are opportunities to be had. We've got low carbon transport highlighted in the report. We've got energy storage, green hydrogen, which is an area that CBI is really looking at given the role it will play in transitioning energy systems. And of course, the abundance of wind and solar, and all on the back of that is how this stuff is going to get financed, right? So with India sort of at that tipping point, maybe hearing around the table from each of you really in some examples of where you see the UK helping to get them over the line, really. And what can the UK gain from India? Because India's got a lot that itself can give back to the UK. So really honing in a little bit more on this partnership, given where you all are coming from in your areas of focus. Just to quickly, before I turn over, I just wanted to mention one housekeeping. For our audience listening in today, please do send your questions in. I will be roping them into the discussion as we go along. A few have been coming through the chat box, so please do continue to do that, or the Q&A box as well, where we can bring those together. So I don't know, maybe James, I don't know if you want to touch on this or Jonathan, who would like to kind of go to that question first?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I have a few comments here on this. I think part of it, you mentioned, how can the UK and India collaborate, I guess, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
We've just recently done a joint venture with a partner in Australia. We've already, we put the joint venture together last month in March, and we already received the first order for 0.5 megawatt of energy storage from this partnership. And it's a collaboration, right? I mean, we have technology, we have know-how, we have I would say world-leading know-how and IP in this space. India has a market, it has a demand, and India has sodium. On pretty much every table in India, you'll find Tata salt, right? And sodium ion is sodium chloride, and it's the 6th most abundant element in the planet. And it's a plentiful resource in India in particular. And so I think, you know, these are ways to collaborate. We did a license and distribution agreement with our partner in India, in Australia. It was one of the Forbes richest men in Australia. He previously owned lithium-ion mines, or lithium mines, I should say, and has sold those and gone all in on sodium ion. So I think it takes a visionary. It takes collaboration. It doesn't have to be, I think there's ways to partner together to be able to bring these technologies to the market. I think the other thing that I've seen from India is I see a lot of announcements and very little action. I've seen big announcements with LG and Mahindra about building a lithium-ion factory, but no one ever put a shovel in the ground to actually get started. They ended up doing it in Vietnam instead. And
James, why do you think that is? That's a really important point. What do you think is holding back? Because I know there's been some points made around issues around regulatory environment, policy support for maybe these new types of technologies. Just keen to know if you have any thoughts there as to what's holding them back.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of the penguin analogy. I think everybody's waiting for the first blood to see if it's safe to jump in a little bit. It's a risk averse view in a way. And I think what China did differently, if I could say, and maybe we can learn from that, is, you know, they put an end-to-end strategy together. They built the factories to make the lithium-ion technology. They incentivize the consumer to create the demand. China will be the fastest growing EV market in the world. And they're actually going towards the LFP technology, which is called lithium iron phosphate, which is lower energy density. Sodium ion is already competitive with that. So the opportunities are there. It takes some action, and I think that's the next step. But the end-to-end strategy, I think if you look in China, it's really quite blurred between universities, industry, and the government. It's a lot more seamless and easier to get things done. I see in the UK we have a lot of incentives. Innovate UK. They tend to be more, a lot of driven by the universities, and it's more difficult for commercial companies to benefit from it as much, in my opinion. And so that's some thoughts on my.
James, so I'll turn to Guri in that respect. I mean, reacting a bit to some of the points, James, do you agree, disagree, and what's your view here on UK-India relations in this respect to help India move?
So I think what James is saying is, I mean, I would see that this would sometimes be the view that outsiders would take, but just putting this into context, I mean, and I'm putting it into context of the times that we are living in. One of the biggest example of a successful collaboration is actually the Oxford AstraZeneca and Serum Institute. And that's really, I mean, it's really the kind of framework or a consortium, if you may, that can drive the change. And, although, we're talking about vaccines in that context, but here what we're talking about, and if I can just carry on with the example of the sodium ion battery, I think what's important is to make sure that there is a consortium or a partnership that takes into account the dominant philosophy that's really running the policy structure now, which is Atmanirbhar Bharat, which is really about getting manufacturing and being self-dependent. So, if we are mindful of the kind of the philosophy underlay, which is what the policies will build upon, then you are actually in a, you can strategize to get a consortium or a group of collaborators together to actually make the difference. And I think that opportunity is very much here, because with the energy storage, the policy is really, it's a lot of it is being driven by the Niti Aayog, which is the think tank, the government think tank that's working on it. And I know that there is a leaning towards lithium ion, but this is where we probably need players who can intervene and create the policy advocacy for having a level playing field of the other technologies that can come in and work to an advantage of the underlying philosophy that policies are being built upon.
Thanks, great. Jonathan, you're nodding your head quite a bit there. It sounds like you agree with a lot of what Gary's saying.
I agree with lots of what's being said. I mean, I think probably three areas I'll just highlight in terms of where the UK could collaborate or could offer assistance or guidance. One is commercialization. So we talk about technology or new technology, but it's actually how you commercialize that into projects. And I think, you know, that it probably ties in with my third point, which is about the policy and regulatory framework. But actually, how is new technology, how is it treated? How is it incentivized? You know, are there tax breaks, for example? And so it's really actually how, if you have a new technology, we've heard lots of them, actually, how do you actually get it to commercialization? How do you get those projects operational? And I think that there is a role to play there for policymakers and government in having a friendly environment for doing so. And I think that's something over the years the UK has been quite good at. Secondly, financing. So how do you finance some of these projects? And obviously the world of project financing for renewables has been around for a while, and I'd say London has been at the centre of that. Actually having a environment where financing these assets, these projects, is you know where you are in terms of what is required, both from the lenders and sponsors. So I think that's quite important. And I suspect in India that project finance environment or structures are not as well trodden, if you like. So I think that's something that perhaps would be useful to sort of to translate over there. And then thirdly, policy and regulatory frameworks and things like, for example, you know, it's all very well talking about having lots of renewables on the system, but how do those renewables get around the country? So you need a reliable and fit for purpose grid system. And so again, that's something that is required. Now, obviously, energy storage can play a role in that at the transmission level, but I know that India has issues with the transmission and distribution system. So that's something that has to be legislated for. And again, going back to the policy and regulatory framework, that's something that should be addressed. And of course, things like EVs, again, lots of potential in India, and how is that, again, how is that legislated? What is the policy framework for that? So I think a combination of those things would absolutely help the deployment of renewables and clean tech in India, and that's obviously something that UK.
Excellent points, Jonathan. I'd like to turn to Julian now, just hearing it from the investor's perspective. And there's a question that's come through that I think is something that's really important. It's related to the conversation we're having today. Of course, so far, panelists are here, the audience is hearing a lot about some of the problems with working in India, other than the sodium component. But can we hear the reasons why working with India is unique compared to other countries, specifically around having vast engineering resources, young workforce, many unicorns, showing that India is already innovating and not just at the edge. So a question to kind of challenge us that I think is an important one. Julian, maybe you can touch on that, but also give us your perspectives, what you heard so far from the investor side.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. That there's a number of answers to this actually, but if you go way back, in UK has been not so great at actually in the past, perhaps opening up new frontier markets and dealing with, not even with just India or China, but even in the States in the past, where our entrepreneurs have perhaps struggled to do that. I mean, that's clearly changed a lot. So I don't think India is particularly different from anything else. But what has changed is the world has got an awful lot smaller over the course of the last 5 or 10 years in terms of communication, and this is much easier for anyone, frankly, to interact in a meaningful way with the people that you need to get to in any location. So I think what the last year has proved to us is that it is very easy to get to the decision makers in be it in government based or corporates or partners. So for us, we are in the business of really creating and helping UK entrepreneurs to make those innovations that can be used right throughout the globe, and India is a really good place for us to be interacting, and that's because India does have the demand, but crucially the manufacturing capabilities that are key, to getting some of these innovations off the ground and scaled. So, from our perspective, it's this initiative is great, and we can, the more help we can give our UK entrepreneurs to be able to get on the ground in India, get making partnerships with the right manufacturers, the better. So, I think we're in a good place, and we're encouraging that all the time.
Julian, do you have any examples to share with us of recent areas that MRSA has been supporting India in what you're saying? Yeah, well, obviously, Jim's been talking a lot around the sort of stuff that Faradian's been doing, and one of our other businesses, which is mentioned in the report, actually, it's Asset Cool, and this is a real kind of future problem, not just for India, but for the world in general. And that's really, if we're talking about kind of the new electric economy and using electric vehicles and the whole kind of shift of the grid to more local, you need to get the electricity to those places, and Asset Cool really looks at the transmission losses in cables, and I know that the guys in that business are doing a lot of stuff with partners and customers in India, and there's some live trials about to go ahead right now. So, and again, I think that's an area as well that India is looking really hard at. So again, that's just an example of us seeding some real kind of entrepreneurs from university backgrounds who are working on something completely different. Kind of taking a step back, thinking, well, actually, where does this technology could it also be applied to, and then connecting the dots as to how to get there, and how to get there best and more efficiently was by looking at some really interesting big Indian partners who were very willing to help us and do some very first trials for the technology. So it's been fantastic. Brilliant. No, that's very helpful to get some of the examples out, because I know many of our participants are keen to know where some of that's been happening. I guess over to you, James. It's known that Faradian is going to start sodium-ion battery manufacturing. Is that right? And if it is, when will it start? And what would be the cost per kilowatt hour on that?
Yeah, so we are already producing. We're commercializing the technology today. Our business model, we've been very capital efficient. So we have an asset-light business model. We develop the technology, and then we partner with manufacturing partners. Right now, those manufacturing partners are in China, because that's where the infrastructure is. We've recently have a license with another manufacturing partner in the UK. AMT Power, they went public on the London AIM market about a month ago, and on the back of that IPO, part of their story was the sodium ion technology, which they call ultra safe, which was licensed for us. So we are doing that. We are in a number of commercial discussions and I would say very advanced commercial discussions in India with a number of let's say tier 1 players. Make in India, effort, campaign in India has certainly drawn a lot of attention. 80% of the cost of a battery cell is the materials. And so being able to, even if you make lithium ion batteries today in India, all the materials do come from China or controlled by China. And so we're working with partners to see how we can start to manufacture the cathodes in India, for example. And so we have a development agreement license in negotiation right now with one of the largest companies there in India in this space. And I think because of the recent government incentives that have come out towards November last year, there's a lot of activity in terms of putting the overall strategy together for these global companies as to what's the right approach, what's the right size of cell manufacturing to do, what's the right technologies to do. One of the advantages with sodium ion is it's produced on the exact same equipment as lithium ion. And currently for EV, you know, the known technology is lithium ion. And so that's a good place to start, but it takes advantage because sodium ion can produce on the same line. So it enables them to bring that in and be able to scale up jointly. And to comment, I think we've seen this, you know, from issues in September 11th when we had those terrorist attacks. A lot of the government regulations tends to be reactive, right? You know, someone tries to bomb someone with their shoes, and you have to take your shoes off at the airport. You have to take your liquids out when you travel. And it's always this kind of reactive. And I think lithium ion has left the station, and so a lot of these policies are chasing the technologies. And I think, you know, there's so much innovation, and the speed of innovation is so fast. It's I would not want to be a politician in these days.
I agree. I agree.
The first flight to the, you know, the Wright brothers and the first man on the moon, they were alive at the same time.
It's insane. It's insane.
That is amazing. And so it is a difficult job to keep up with the regulations, but
yeah, especially when you're only in for 4 or 5 years, right? So we all know that that's sort of the biggest issue. And I guess, Jonathan, you've touched on this, the need for better or a strong foundation of policy and regulations that can help support this. And maybe you can elaborate a bit more on some examples there, just for our listeners, on especially to foster a relationship between the UK and India. What needs to be in place to kind of help this come together, if at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think long-term policy targets or frameworks is key, and you know, we have that in the UK, albeit that there's been chopping and changing of some of the incentives. But really, I think it's, you know, to give you an example, in the UK, energy storage was seen as the next big thing, but actually one of the issues with how does storage fit into a system or a framework that was designed for large coal-fired power stations up, you know, in the north and transmitting the power, you know, from the north to the south. So actually, what is energy storage? Is it generation? Is it supply? Is it distribution? How does that fit in with the framework? So the difficulty at the moment is we have lots of fast-moving, fantastic technologies, but they're not necessarily catered for in the in the regulatory framework or by policy. So I think that's something that you know, all countries are grappling with at the moment. And you know, I guess one thing we could say is that, you know, the UK can absolutely recommend things that have worked over here that may work, you know, in India. And I think that there are differences, and I mentioned some of those before, in terms of things like the infrastructure, the grid infrastructure that has to be addressed. But I think, you know, when we're talking about India, the economies of scale, the size, the sheer, the potential. And given that the vast engineering resources and you know, fantastic minds coming out of university, I think India is world leading in that, and sort of, I think, got quite a young workforce as well. So I think all of those things added together, combined with, you know, some if you like, some help from the UK, I think makes it a very exciting opportunity.
Well, I completely agree. And one of the questions that come through that I also think is quite interesting to touch on, it's around requirements for local content. And have we been seeing any ESG language in some of the tenders? Is that started to emerge yet? Sounds like silence, that no one's come across it. Maybe Julian, I don't know if this is something.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, ESG is critical. You know, it's a real big part of of Mercia's investment philosophy. It has been for a while actually, but it's definitely at the forefront at the minute, and especially in the London financing market, it's kind of front and central. So we are certainly embracing it.
Great. Yeah, no, this is for sure the area that CBI focuses on with the green bonds market, of course, and that product and other labeled products is serving to be number one, another avenue for accessing private capital. And in India explicitly, I remember a few years ago, we had the National Thermal Power Corporation of India issuing their first green bond, which raised eyebrows because, of course, NTPC is, the largest electricity provider of coal in India. But this was a response to Modi's policy on 175 gigawatt of renewable energy power by 2022, where that may be now. But the main thing is that policy signal was so important because it got a lot of activity happening in those early days around getting finance into the renewable energy space. And it was a very, very successful bond, and a lot of ESG mandates set at the investor side. Green bonds and other types of products are really helping to meet that. So for some of our listeners. Gauri, one of the questions that's come through, which kind of touches on some of the points you made, is what is the role of research universities? For example, will the anticipated Irritan Fund facilitate collaborations between universities and corporates in UK and India? And maybe touch on where ARENA's seeing some of this happening and how it can be important.
Justin, I think R&D is going to play a very important role in the way collaborations are structured, because there is a growing body of very, very capable scientists and graduates coming out of the STEM in India, which allows a very solid collaboration to happen. And this is pretty much in keeping with the whole philosophy, as I talked about, of going for greater self-reliance. And I think unless there is a dynamic structure around which there can be a participation between the researchers in the universities and in research institutes in UK and in India, you really won't see that kind of a momentum taking off in the manufacturing space. So it has to all come together. I just want to add here that some of the areas that are really looking very, very attractive are definitely, as we spoke about, the EV market that's starting to pick up. There is obviously a great need of infrastructure that has to be put in place before that really takes off. But frugal engineering, as we all know, is something that India really prides itself in. And that combined with the huge potential that has come up in terms of the electricity demand going up, because in the last few years of the previous decade, what really happened is we saw all the households in India getting connected with electricity. So you have a 100% electricity access in India, which means that there's going to be this huge demand that's pretty much latent at this point of time, that's going to show up in a few years as as the agriculture reforms happen, as there is a buoyancy in the economy. And that is going to lead to a greater need for energy. And if we look at what's been stated by the Prime Minister in terms of the 450 gigawatts, that pretty much, in my mind, converts a majority of that will convert into variable renewable power. And that's taking Jonathan's point forward, that there is going to be a huge uptake in the grid and the transmission network moving there. And there is also this ambition of connecting with regional grids. So all in all, there is, I think, a huge scope and a potential for collaboration in the infrastructure space, which for which there are, I think, the regulators also working overtime to make sure that they can get in private investment and also foreign direct investment.
Thank you, Gary. Very, very good points. And I'll treat those as we're fast approaching the hour, the end of the hour, which is amazing how quickly these can go, as your closing comments. So thank you very much. And so what I'd like to do then is turn around to the rest of you to say your final words before we wrap up. James.
Let me unmute. I think that's one of the phrases that's going to last after COVID. I think you're on mute, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think what's interesting, when I joined Faradian and I was meeting all the team and everybody, what I found is that everybody had worked with each other at one point or another at Dyson or this place or that, and they changed jobs and they all made more money, but we weren't increasing the knowledge base. And I think that's a fundamental problem. A lot of the quality and the safety in a battery is from manufacturing know-how. And I think by manufacturing, you generate this know-how, you build up this knowledge base within the workforce, you improve your development know-how, your innovation, you inch the technology forward. And I think that's really an important aspect of it in India. And I think there's a huge opportunity there for India to do that. And I think that will come. There's no question of will it come. It's just a question of timing, and things tend to go gradually and then suddenly. And I think we'll see that. I do think that what, again, maybe this space race theme was, I think, uniting the nation behind, a common goal is very, very powerful. And I'm reminded of a story of the CEO of one of the big defense contractors around the time of the space race. He came in on a Sunday night to the factory and there was a guy sweeping the floor. And he said, "Hey, what are you doing? It's Sunday night, you're sweeping the floor here." And he says, "I'm helping to put a man on the moon." And I think that kind of a vision and a unified goal is very important. And I think if India can harness all of this energy behind this kind of an energy transition, it can be extremely powerful.
Thank you, James. Powerful closing comments as well. So thank you. Julian.
Yeah, thanks. So for me, Mercia is really one of the leading investors in kind of clean tech, deep tech space in the UK, and it's really kind of in our DNA to back entrepreneurs in this whole space. And I think, for me, it's really important for us to continue to encourage those entrepreneurs to look at India as a really big market and a big partner for the manufacturing needs. So we'll just continue to do what we've been doing for the last 10 years, and that's really where we're focused in this whole piece.
Thank you, Julian. An extremely important role, that is for sure. Jonathan.
Well, thanks all. I mean, I think it's been a very positive discussion. I think one of the things that I often hear about is, well, actually, okay, well, how does it benefit the customer, the end consumer, all these green technologies? And I think, probably going back to James's point about customer engagement, well, if I'm living in a village that's off grid, well, how does this affect me? And actually, I think one of the phrases that I hear often is the 3 Ds: decarbonisation, decentralisation, and digitisation. And actually, customers should feel that this does affect them, because actually, ultimately, the cost to them, it's not just being green, but actually potentially the costs of using energy, of being a consumer, are going to be less than this. And I think just that alone, just given the size of the economy and the population in India, I think is such a powerful message. And I think there's so many opportunities, and I think it's a very exciting time. So I think thank you for being involved.
Thank you, Jonathan. And well, that brings us to the hour. And so let me just say that a lot of what we've heard today it's very clear that the opportunities are there. But it comes down to some fundamentals, such as knowledge dissemination. I really liked that point James made. It's critical that what we are developing, what we have, is disseminating itself across borders. Supportive policies so investments can flow, technologies can thrive, can be developed, and the commercialization of that and the financing required to get these things off the ground. There is no doubt in my mind, given the work that we've done in India, India is going to be a powerhouse and is going to set the direction in the world. And of course, how the UK can help to foster that, support that through a UK-India relation will be extremely beneficial for both parties involved. So I'd like to say thank you, big thank you to our panelists today. Fantastic conversation. Really appreciate your points put into the call, into the discussion. But also, of course, to Sanya and Pratik at Bridge India. Great report. Very happy to be here to support you in the launch. And to our listeners, thank you very much for your questions. Sorry we couldn't get to all of them, but the questions we did receive, thank you very much for that. So with that, I say farewell and hope the rest of your days go well, and take care.